Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, November 4th meeting of the Regional Sewage Commission. And I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. Welcome to commissioners and staff here in the CVRD boardroom today. And I'll acknowledge Ian Monroe, who is the alternate for Director Arbor from Area A, who is sitting in on the meeting today and has voice but not vote. And we'll also welcome Kevin Stevens, who is our CFB Comox representative, who's been able to join us in person today. So the first item on our agenda is the resolution status report dated October 25th. A motion for receipt, please. Moved by Grant, seconded by McCollum. Any questions or comments? Anyone opposed? That is carried. And our first report is from the Sewage Management Advisory Committee, the minutes dated October 23rd. A motion for receipt, moved by Grant, seconded by McCollum. Questions or comments? Anyone opposed? That is carried. And item number 2, Sewer Extension South, Comox Valley Sewage Service and Capital Improvement Cost Charges Follow-Up. A report dated October 30th, and a motion for receipt, please. Moved by Grant, seconded by Swift, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon to the Sewage Commission. I'd like to introduce Chris LaRose, our Senior Manager of Water and Wastewater Services, who will be introducing the staff report on the capital improvement cost charges follow-up. So Chris, over to you.
Thank you, James, and through the chair, just prepared a brief presentation here to help provide a summary of the staff report. Thank you, Lisa. So this report follows on a report from last year, actually, and it actually goes farther back than that. I've just got a brief timeline here, which is summarized in the report, but I just thought I'd lay it out here. So back in August of 2022, the Sewage Commission approved service area expansion to defined areas of Area A. And this was in support of the Sewer South Extension project. And at the same time, staff also supported the process by developing an estimated proportion of the non-depreciated value of the CVSS assets at that point in time, which then Area A contributed as a contribution towards those assets. So that was in August of 2022. And then in February of 2024, the EASC passed a motion requesting that a request be made to the Commission to hold the capital improvement cost charges at the rates in place at that point in time in August 2022 when the service was extended, the service area was extended. So that staff received that request and brought a report through the May 2024 Commission meeting recommending support of the request for a range of reasons, which I will summarize on a subsequent slide. The Commission at the time deferred the matter back to staff with a request that we come back once we had an idea of what the avoided revenue would be should the request be approved. So the difference between CICC revenue from the existing properties in the south at the August 2022 rates, or the rates that will soon be in place after we've completed our development cost charge update. So fast forward to September of this year, the board passed the third reading of the DCC bylaw, updating those rates. And our practice is to update the CICC bylaw and match those rates. So different application, but the same rate. And then subsequent to that, we submitted the bylaws for provincial review, and that's where they stand right now. But we do expect to hear back from the province fairly shortly, and we hope to be in a position to bring forward in the fourth reading of the DCC bylaw fairly shortly. And that would allow us to then bring back the CICC bylaw. So to that specific request that was made last year by the Commission. So the estimated revenue from the existing properties within that defined area section of Area A is 8.69 million. That's what we estimate the revenue would be at the rates in place in 2022. At the anticipated updated CICC rate, should the province support our bylaw, the avoided revenue, so the difference between the 2022 rate and the 2026 rate would be about just under $14 million. And then the third number that I'll draw your attention to is the estimated DCC revenue over the next 20 to 30 years from new parcels or units if the project proceeds is in the order of 40 to 50 million. So just a reminder, the request here is that CICC rates for existing properties be held, but then obviously any new parcels or units in the south created would pay the future DCC rate. And that's where that $40 to $50 million estimate comes in. And it just needs to be noted that this is a bit of an existential question for the Sewer Extension South project, which has many other cost pressures. And so rather than thinking of it as avoided revenue, really without arguably without the holding the rates at those 2022 levels, those two numbers in green are likely won't be forthcoming to the service. And that just brings me to a summary of why support the request. So staff are recommending that the request be supported, and this is why. The first being the benefits to the service. As highlighted on that prior slide, there's the potential for very significant revenue to flow into the service through development cost charges. So that will be that could be a significant help to the service, which is facing a range of capital pressures, as we know, through the conveyance project, which is well underway. And then the next item on the agenda relates to upgrades at the treatment plant, both very capital intensive projects. So certainly those that capital would not go amiss. And then secondly, as far as the benefit to the CDSS goes, the dilution of operating costs. If that project goes ahead and that development occurs, we could see a significant dilution of operational costs, which would help to avoid further increases or reduce further increases to the municipal requisition. And then there's the benefit to the valley. The project itself is driven by the need to make some progress on resolving the longstanding environmental impacts in Bain Sound, and with the corresponding impacts to aquaculture, which is an important local sector and important provincially as well. And then finally, from a reconciliation perspective, this project was a key part of the community benefits agreement, which facilitated the delivery of the conveyance project. And as we all know, development in the south and servicing for development in the south is a key part of the KFN development strategy. And then finally, the existing CICC bylaw language is ambiguous with respect to the timing of payment and what rate should be paid. And there is a local precedent in the CICC bylaw for the Comox Valley water system, which still has a schedule attached to it with a list of municipal properties that were brought in through boundary extension that are being held at a very low rate. And finally, if the recommended approach is supported, we're hoping, as I mentioned, to receive provincial approval of the DCC bylaw shortly, which would allow us to bring forward the draft CICC bylaw for the commission to review. And that would include addressing that ambiguous language in the bylaw to make it clear that the rates in place at the time of system extension would be payable. Would be addition of a new Schedule B listing those properties existing in Area A, and then including language in there that would require periodic review of the CICC rates in that Schedule B to ensure that they don't go stale. So that's all it for me, but happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Chris. I'm fairly sure you're going to have some questions. Over to commission members, Director McCollum.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I have a few questions. But maybe I'll just start with understanding a little bit about this Schedule B and how that would work. We don't have really a clear timeline of what, I mean, I guess we do have a sense of the timeline, but I don't know that it's been updated since the challenges with the Union Bay Estates or, you know, how much certainty we have around that. And what we're proposing here is to freeze rates at, I think, approximately a 2007 bylaw amount. And I just wanted to understand, so the way I read the recommendation in the report is that when we provide service to an area, that they would be required to join the service at that point in time at this frozen amount that's being asked for. So if we were to take another, say, 15 years to get a service line into, you know, an older neighborhood in Union Bay, would they still be paying these frozen rates? Is this like, as long as this South Sewer extension exists, every time in Area A that we extend the service to some new properties, they would essentially be having this subsidized rate of connection? Is that correct?
So two pieces. First of all, this would only, just a reminder, this would only apply to properties in existence, parcels in existence in 2022. So not new properties, but
Yeah, sorry, I meant like new properties in that we
Not
are
yet
extending to those, not yet subdivided, but not yet connected.
yes,
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely agreed on that. So, and then the second piece, so that's that third, the bottom bullet. So we're proposing that there be some periodic review of those rates for the Schedule B properties, implying that, you know, probably doesn't make sense to leave them on there forever. Although that is how the existing CVWS schedule is worded. I mean, there's a declining list of properties there within the town of Comox and the city of Courtenay that are still paying $1,000 property, you know, if and when they get a pipe in front of them on the street. So there is no such language for periodic review in that existing bylaw, but we are suggesting that it probably makes sense to have some periodic review where we, you know, where we review, you know, is this still likely to happen? Is it still reasonable to hold the rates at this historic level or not? So that's a change from what we currently see in the water system bylaw.
Okay, so, and for clarity, so if there is an existing parcel on, say, a street in Royston that doesn't currently have a dwelling on it, that's never been connected to like a septic field, and all of its neighbors have an existing home, would that, and someone builds, say, a house, maybe a house with a carriage suite, would that new house pay the 6,000 amount, or would it pay a DCC?
Yeah, so it's the parcel. So that if the parcel existed like the proposed approach is if the parcel existed in 2022, then it gets to develop at that rate, whether there's a house on it now or not. It's only newly created property, like parcels created since 2022 or units created since 2022 would pay the future rate. Any parcels that were in existence in 2022 would pay the kind of the grandfather, the held rate.
Okay, so sorry, so if there's an existing parcel that doesn't have a property or a house on it, and we extend the service and there's nothing to connect, and they build a house, you know, 3 or 4 years later, even though our recommendation is that it's due at the time that the service is available, if there's no house there, they can still connect at a later date at a discount, at a lower DCC than what any other properties in the service would pay.
That's, yeah, I see where you're going with that. I think, I believe the approach in the south would be has been that the CACC would be owing when the potential to connect is present. So when sewer service is extended into a neighborhood, CICC would be owing from all of those properties, whether there's a home there or not.
Director McCollum, perhaps we'll
Yeah.
give somebody else an opportunity and we can come back to you. Director Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for the report, Chris. I guess I wanted to build perhaps onto an unspoken part of Councillor McCollum's question, which is if this property were then to, if we believe that the small scale multi-unit housing is sort of allowing 4 units per property is likely to be expanded to include like settlement nodes, expansion areas, rural areas where there is servicing. If there was a house and then there were to be 3 additional units built there, would they each individually pay this lower rate, or would they pay given that the property itself is, or does the initial payment of CICCs cover the entire property for and 3 potential further units?
That's a good question. To be honest, I don't have a solid answer for you on that. I think yeah, whether it's the kind of the units that are in place at the time, or whether they're, yeah, so that's, I think we could take that one away. And yeah, because the new, so just to remind the commission, so the new DCC bylaw provides for a secondary suite and potentially an additional unit, a carriage house. So yeah, your question is, would that be provided to the southern properties? I think without additional language, that would be the default. It would provide for those 2 additional units, because they would have paid the CICC.
Okay, so just to sort of comment on that, is that would seem that would kind of distort the property market in making certain units on certain properties significantly less expensive to develop on. And I find our lack of certainty on that and the potential there to be deeply discounting certain places for settlement expansion. Anyway, I find it a bit challenging in relation to this, but I'll just kind of leave it there.
All right, Director McCollum.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I do have some concerns around the fairness of this as well. And I guess one question that I have is that I mean, you highlighted it in your report as well, Chris, that this assumption around the dilution of operating costs across the service when we have more connections to it. Although we are also very much extending the area in which we're operating infrastructure. So like, I'm not clear about how that creates operational efficiency. I mean, I'm fairly clear, or I have a reasonable degree of certainty that generally if we add density on existing infrastructure, that there should be some operational efficiencies, although reading about the cost of implementing a water treatment plant in Victoria and Metro Vancouver makes me wonder if that's even true all of the time. But in this case, I don't really recall seeing any analysis around that about how extending the service boundary would result in kind of a lower cost burden to the existing connections or the existing sewer participants. And so I'm wondering, has there been like an analysis done that was present? I mean, my time on the board here is limited to the last couple of years, and this conversation goes way longer than that. And so I'm wondering if staff is relying on some analysis that we had done with that, or if it is just kind of looking at, that there is more people paying in. So we're assuming that it would be cheaper in the long run.
Yeah, so certainly we have done analysis back in 2024 to support our presentation in May of 24. So, keeping in mind that the proposal here is that all new infrastructure would be funded by the South partners. So then, we're not shouldering, the proposal is not to shoulder the existing service with the cost of that new infrastructure. So from year one, the costs of managing the wastewater treatment plant and the pump stations that process or that convey water from the south as well as elsewhere would be shared amongst a larger pool of people. So over the long term, from an asset management perspective, while the south properties will be funding the new infrastructure, it will then become part of the regional service. So from an operational perspective, it's the pump stations and the force main. Local collection systems would be, and potentially local pump stations would be funded by local service areas. So there's no doubt the analysis was clear that there is a dilution effect, that the additional properties in the south have a net diluting effect on the operations and capital cost, even taking into account the long-term asset management costs of that infrastructure.
Is that maybe a report that we could see at some point? I don't, has that been presented to the board? It's
only to support the, not the detailed staff analysis, but just the results of that in last year's presentation.
Yeah, my apologies if I've just forgotten about it. But I do think that would help in terms of making our decision here and understanding that, perhaps this $14 million of revenue that we would be foregoing would somehow not necessarily be made up by, increased user fees on the rest of the service. I mean, the whole point of a DCC is that is the calculation that has been done in a very detailed way, that is a calculation of the cost of growth on the service. So, it is kind of hard to square both that, it's not going to be a cost burden to have all these connections come on that pays 60% less than this DCC that we've just calculated and determined is the actual cost of growth. I mean, the next report on the agenda really outlines some of the, massive costs that we're looking at going forward. So I'm not really clear where the 14 million is going to be recouped from, other than from service fees from the people who are already on the system. And I suppose the additional user fees that would be required for the new connections as well. So, yeah, I guess that's part of the challenge that I'm having right now.
Chris, did you have any comment on that?
No, just that I understand the comment, and if Commission directs us to report back, we can certainly bring forward and present some analysis to help address those concerns.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Alternate Director Monroe.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to this room for allowing me to participate in this discussion. I have spent a bit of time on this topic as part of the PAC-TAC meetings for the Sewer Extension South project, so I'm quite familiar with all of the discussions that went into that, and the financial math that was done, and the public information gathering that was a part of that, and got a very good sense of where the public stood with respect to this project. And I would sort of characterize it as accepting from sort of a moral and environmental point of view, and very reluctant from a financial perspective, in that the proposal that had been put forward and the analysis that had been done as a part of our liquid waste management plan addendum was burdensome, but people were accepting it at the level that it was, and that the PAC recommended that the addendum be approved and sent forward. That said, if each household were then to be asked to accumulate or assume another $13,000, I think Chris's comment that would be an existential threat to the project. that I think it would necessitate withdrawing the LWNP addendum and having to redo that work and get public approval again. And, you know, if that weren't to happen, then I think from an Area A perspective, it would be necessary to demand it go to referendum. And we know what referendums have done on this topic in the South before. So, you know, from the perspective of where does the money go, that extra $13 million, I would also ask the question is what happens if you don't get the $6 million? And I think Chris alluded to that as well. And if you don't get the $6 million, then the DCCs don't kick in. So what does that mean for the system overall? And I think an analysis of what if we didn't have it versus what if we did at the recommended lower CICC rate, what would the finances for the system look like? Because I think that's what this is really about is having the South connected with Union Bay being a settlement node within the community plan. That's where the growth is coming from, and that growth will support the cost of the system as well. So I think that's the analysis has to be done more fulsomely, not, hey, we're losing $13 million, but we might be losing $46 to $56 million instead. But back to my original point on it, the public has supported it at the level it's at. I'm fairly certain they won't support it if the charges were to go up.
Thanks for that. And Chris, feel free to jump in. Director Grant.
Yeah, thanks. I find this a really confusing report. And then after some of the discussion, I finding it even more confusing. And so what I would like to see is that this be sent back to our staff and probably the staff at Courtney to go over this and review it with us so we can have a better understanding of where this is going. Like there seems to be $14 million missing out of this plan that is going to get laid onto our constituents to pay for, unless I'm reading this wrong somehow, or an amount of that nature. And it would be really nice to get a more wholesome analysis from our side as to what we, you know, how we see this working out.
Any comments from staff? James?
Thanks. I think just maybe if Chris, if there's any language around the engagement with advisory, we meet with the Sewer Management Advisory Committee regularly, and whether there was much commentary at that meeting. I think we can come back with additional analysis, like Chris said, if that's the intent of the commission to understand more. We can certainly work with the municipal staff as we do to elaborate or explain the impacts. Part of that analysis or part of that coming back, I think it's important to draw the distinction between the DCCs and the CICCs, and the DCCs and the rates that were determined and calculated in that bylaw that's with the ministry now. That is really about that development, future development, and the CICCs are about service extension. And so there's a distinction there. I think it's an important piece to raise. And the way the DCC, I could be wrong, but the way the DCC rates are calculated, it's about the projects identified for growth in the community. And so the rates to be collected through that DCC bylaw would provide for reserve funds to be able to contribute towards that work. And that's I think it's just an important distinction to make between the CICCs, which perhaps we need to provide more explanation around.
Okay, thanks for that. And Chris, did you want to add a comment?
No, just to echo James's comments there, that we can certainly, on the basis of the comments today, we could certainly bring back a fulsome analysis to help answer these questions. I just conferred briefly with Zoe there just to clarify, and maybe this is one of the points of confusion that Director Grant mentioned. Just for example, in calculation of the so I think it may be best to report back, but in calculation of the existing DCC rates that are being brought forward, there was a decision point about so because this would be a capital improvement cost charge revenue, it was not factored into the rate analysis. So, you know, to Director Monroe's point, if the project does not proceed, there's a, it does not impact the funding for the DCC projects on the list. If it does proceed, there's an additional revenue that would then be factored in the next time that a DCC update is performed. So that's just to help provide a little bit more context there.
Thanks. And Director McCollum?
Yeah, thanks. I am liking the idea of maybe having this go back to our respective councils, just given that this is a pretty significant amount of money that we're talking about. I think the grant funding on this project from the province is maybe around $30 million as far as the Area A side is concerned. Maybe I'm wrong about that. So this is about half of all the funding that's coming in from higher levels of government. So it's not insignificant. In the advisory meeting minutes, the comment from CVRD staff to Courtney was that the CICCs and the DCCs are go into the same reserve, and traditionally they have been the same amount. So, I mean, adding a new area and connecting onto a new conveyance line is going to drive the need for additional capital investments at our treatment plant. There's no two ways about it. So it is a complicated set of priorities here in that and some of those were very well laid out in the presentation, that we have environmental factors, we have our relationship with KFN, and then we're also asking the service to pick up a pretty big price tag. So I think it would be useful to have CVRD staff come to our councils and actually present this. And based on this discussion, some of those questions that have come up on, like, how does the new SMU legislation impact some of these, like, I mean, if you can do a fourplex south of town for a CICC that's like, $20,000 less than in the city of Courtney, are we encouraging, more development to happen away from services? Like, there's some questions to really be clear about before we proceed with making this change. So I don't know if it would be helpful just to make a motion to refer it to our councils, and then perhaps we could have that information come from the CVRD and get discussed at our council tables, just given the importance of the topic.
Well, we are in receipt, so we'll just make sure that there's no further dialogue before we move to that. Does anybody else want to ask a question or make a comment before we deal with receipt? All right, anyone opposed? Oh, sorry, go ahead, James.
I just wonder if from a timing perspective, and I haven't talked to Chris obviously about the referral potential here, but I imagine, did you want to comment at all on the timing and that ability? And I would really welcome CVRD staff to be able to attend if this is a discussion at the Courtney and Comont's council tables. So any consideration on timing around that, Chris?
Yeah, maybe just a question. Would the intent be to first come back to the commission with further analysis, or to go directly to councils?
Well, it sounds like there may be both. That's certainly what's been coming up in the conversation. But we can see what sort of a motion actually comes forward.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of how quickly we could present, regardless of whether it be to this commission or to councils,
We'll have to do our best to be able to.
Yeah, it's
schedule
gonna
that.
take a little bit of time to put that together, and I think I also heard mention of bringing it through the advisory for discussion. So I think maybe we're looking at January, but just tentatively.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. And alternate director Monroe, did you have anything further? Okay. All right. Any further comments on receipt? Anyone opposed to receipt? That is carried. And there is a recommendation, but if somebody wants to move an alternate recommendation, Director McCollum.
I'll move that we refer this, this report back to the municipalities for further discussion.
Okay, is that instructive enough for staff to work with?
I think so. I think that there will be a subsequent discussion at the commission table, and the presentations that we provide and discussion from the council tables will inform the commission discussion as well. And staff will take this and be able to put together material.
Thanks. Director Grant?
Just wondering if this would maybe make sense to wait until after you've got the extra information in January and then come to the council. It's a question. I don't know what the rest think, but you know, it's an interesting one. So I'd like to hear that, but I'm just not sure whether that's the right way to go or whether we should just get the initial report.
I think based on the questions raised here, we'd want to be able to be ready to answer those, and so we'll have to take whatever time is necessary to pull that together and then speak to your councils.
Okay, so after January.
Sorry, Director Grant, your mic's not on, so nobody can hear you, but I think we've got the gist of what you're saying, and we'll go to Director Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much. I've had the question similar to Director Grant. I think there's definitely more financial information that would be useful for us to make a responsible decision with such a large sum of money online. And I just wanted to maybe check in with staff to sort of get a sense of what they understood that further financial information was, just to make sure we're all on the same page when this report comes back. I'm not sure if that would be Chris or James to respond to that.
So James is checking his notes, but Chris has a comment.
So what I heard was an interest in understanding the impacts on development cost charges now and in the future, and some quantification of the benefits from a capital sharing and operational cost dilution. So the points that were made at a high level in the report, there's some interest in seeing some analysis to support that. So exactly, you know, I'm thinking potentially with some growth scenarios in the south, you know, exactly what that looks like from a capital and operating perspective for existing users in the service, existing users and developers.
That sounds.
And one other element around the new housing legislation. I heard that a couple of times raised, and
Yes.
so some consideration to that.
Yeah, and maybe just very briefly, just to speak to that point about the fourplex. So my understanding of, there was a lot of effort locally to synchronize the definitions in the DCC bylaws. So the fourplexes are not permitted under the single family dwelling rate, so that which allows a secondary suite and a carriage house. So that's 3, not 4. Just a nuance there that was brought up by a couple of directors. So a fourplex is considered multi-family, I believe, not single family. So single family allows up to 3. Yeah.
Okay, we've got a few more people who want to comment, and we do have another item on our agenda in about 20 minutes. I'll have to go here. So alternate Director Monroe.
Just a quick reiteration of my thoughts for an analysis that should be done with the existential aspect of the South. What does the future pro forma capital planning, DCCs, CICCs look like with the South Sewer at the frozen rates? And what does it look like without the South at all? Because I do believe that if DCCs are charged instead of CICCs, the South will be out because it won't be affordable. So I think that analysis needs to be done, is what does it look like with and what does it look like without?
Yeah, thanks for that strong point, Director McCollum.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. I'll be fast. Yeah, the comment that Chris raised about the difference between the single family and a carriage house versus a fourplex. I guess one of the things that we would want to bring into the staff report is understanding how that SMU legislation impacts what we're delivering. Because what my understanding is from looking at the RGS and when this rolled out, and I may not have it straight, but I was under the understanding that when you bring water and sewer servicing, even if it's not in a municipal boundary, it does pull in the SMOO legislation as well, which means that when we implement this, these properties could have a fourplex. That's how I understood it. I could be completely mistaken. It's complicated. So perhaps we could get some analysis on what this means in terms of potential development, what those properties would be required to pay should somebody decide that they want to, build to the maximum of what's allowed rather than just putting a single family home in place and what that means for what we're considering implementing here. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I'm getting indication from staff that they're hearing that loud and clear. So the motion that's on the floor is that the capital improvement cost charges report be referred to the town of Comox and the city of Courtenay for further discussion. Not in the motion, but there's been a number of points that have made asking staff for additional information for this commission, which would form part of what would be presented to those two municipal bodies. And Krista, do you want to make a final comment?
Nope, all good. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any last comments here? Just before we vote on this, I just want to acknowledge alternate director Monroe that I don't think any of this discussion is to undervalue how important we all see the South Sphere project being for the reasons that have been stated, and important that we get as clear as we can on the implications of this particular issue to help that project to move along in a good way. All right, the motion is on the floor. All those in favor? And are there any opposed? That motion is carried. And thanks very much for that. So next on our agenda, and thanks, Chris, for your work on that. We have number 3, the Comox Valley Water Pollution Control Center Draft Site Master Plan. And we have an October 29th report for receipt. A motion, please. Moved by Grant, seconded by Cole Hamilton, and over to staff.
Thanks, Chair. Zoe Berkey, our senior engineering analyst, will be introducing this report. So Zoe, over to you.
Thanks, James. Lisa, I shared my screen, but there we go. Great, thank you. Yeah, just created a brief PowerPoint to walk us through this today. So the report on your agenda is the draft site master plan, and it's intended for just information purposes only today, just to provide an update, present the first draft, the intent being that it would go to the TAC pack later in November for review before coming back to this commission for approval. So the objectives of the site master plan, there was many. A big one was revising the service population projections and design criteria in light of the time that had passed since we started the LWMP process, as we were just talking about Bill 44 and addition of the South Sewer Addendum, as well as developing a cost-effective, resilient infrastructure strategy, and really looking at ways to maximize the reuse of our existing infrastructure. So not just building tankage because we need it, can we optimize the process that's already at the plant to kind of minimize those capital expenses where possible. Part of this was, the intent of the plan was to identify capacity bottlenecks and end-of-life equipment. Is, coupled with the capacity component is the plant is, over 40 years old now. And so there was, there is a lot of end-of-life equipment that just needs to be replaced. We also considered the costs and benefits of a number of resource recovery options at the direction or the request of the province as part of their stage 1 and 2 review. And we established the timing of the upgrades based on the goals recommended in both the liquid waste management planning process and considering the municipal wastewater regulation redundancy and regulatory requirements. And ultimately came up with an implementation plan that estimated the cost and the scope of the upgrades along with the timing and the phasing. So the first piece of this work was revising the service population projections for the Comox Valley Sewer Service. And we've got an updated 2060 service population of 94,300 people. So this included updating kind of the organic growth within the existing sewer area, the infill density motivated by the new provincial regulations, and then also adding in the South Sewer extension areas as the addendum was brought in to the LWMP planning process. Presented previously was the concept for the wet weather treatment process at the plant. So this was presented in March and is embedded within the site master plan. So the approach for the liquid stream at the wastewater treatment plant is to include a high rate wet weather treatment process and chemically enhanced primary treatment. So this defers the need for additional primary clarifiers by using a chemically enhanced process under wet weather flows to gain capacity in the tanks we already have. Also included within the wet weather approach is the concept and the idea of bypassing peak flows greater than 2 times our average dry weather flow to a filter and UV disinfection prior to discharge. So blending with the secondary effluent that receives full flow or full treatment, but just reducing, this kind of bypass approach reduces the upgrade requirements for our secondary treatment. While still meeting regulatory objectives, and also provides an additional benefit of improving effluent quality under dry weather flow conditions by having the filter in place. Also committed through the LWMP process is the addition of UV disinfection for all flows at the plant. In addition to the liquid stream, the site master plan also reviews the solid stream and the solids management at the plant. So sludge production is a continuous process that occurs through wastewater treatment, and management of that sludge is also very important. So as part of the plan, we reviewed the level of redundancy to kind of address and assess risk. So regulations, unlike the liquid stream, there's not a specific redundancy requirement for tankage. So we've assessed the different components of our solids management stream at the plant and have kind of decided that a substantial upgrade is needed in 2045, but have come up with a few process optimization pieces to eke out some more capacity until that time. As mentioned previously, we also looked at some resource recovery options, and this was really kind of a direction for cost benefit analysis from the province. So we reviewed 3 options: heat recovery, reclaimed water, and anaerobic digestion. We've ruled out heat recovery and anaerobic digestion at this time due to the high capital costs and the payback period being greater than the expected lifespan of the equipment. However, we currently use reclaimed water at the plant, and we have continued or incorporated reclaimed water use within the phase 4 upgrades, along with adding some new reclaimed water uses to offset potable use. With the filter being in place, we can use the reclaimed water for pump seal water and a couple other process pieces that will help further offset our potable water consumption at the plant. That being said, the list and the amount of work that still needs to happen as part of that phase 4 upgrade is pretty substantial. Shown on the map here. So we need a new headworks facility, and that's really both capacity and condition driven. The existing channels within that headworks are in very, very poor concrete condition, and there's no real way to isolate them and rehab them. A retrofit to the administration building. This is both for the electrical room, along with an expansion to accommodate more staff as we continue to see more flow. Chemically enhanced primary treatment as part of that wet weather flow approach that we just discussed. Some updates and upgrades to the bioreactor aeration to eke out more capacity from the tanks that are already there rather than building new ones. Same goes for the MLSS, or the mixed litter splitter chamber. This is really intended to improve our process to get more out of what we already have in terms of secondary clarifiers and bioreactors. Tertiary filtration, UV disinfection, reclaimed water. As part of a previous staff report in June, we discussed the outfall and decided, based on the condition assessment results, that we could proceed with a modest pressure increase to get more capacity rather than needing that full outfall replacement now. So you'll see on the phase 4 scope includes the effluent pump station upgrade to change out those pumps to give us a bit more pressure and capacity. And then there's just some odor control modifications that are required as we add more rooms that need odor control and create odors. And then a number of smaller components that are just condition assessment related or driven equipment replacements that make sense to do at the same time when we're in there ripping everything up. So that's the phase 4. The site master plan also kind of came up with the future plans for the following years to what we need to get to till 2060. So there's a phase 5 upgrade, which is roughly around 2040, which would be a new primary clarifier, so a replacement of scrubber 1 for the odor control system. So scrubber 1 would be at the end of life and then would also need to be upsized to capture that additional air from the primary clarifier, and some motor control center replacements as things start to get to the end of life and we're in there touching the scrubber. And potential for a tertiary filtration expansion depending on sizing and flows and loads. The phase 6 upgrades, as mentioned previously, would be really kind of solids management driven. So a lot of new tankage and some centrifuge upgrades associated with our solids management process, along with also being the trigger from a flows and loads perspective of needing a new bioreactor and secondary clarifier. And then that final phase would be a new primary clarifier and additional odor control upgrades and replacement of the other scrubber at the end of life with a larger capacity unit in 2060. I will pass it over to Chris now to talk about the costs.
Thanks, Zoe. Great summary of such a huge body of work. I'm not sure if anybody looked at the attachment, but it's hundreds of pages of analysis over the last several years by a multidisciplinary team to really dive deep into this facility and figure out how we can maximize the life of the existing infrastructure and defer as much capital to future phases. On the slide here is a summary of the cost estimates for the 4 phases of work, 4, 5, 6, and 7, listed in 2025 dollars and then escalated to the midpoint of construction. So you can see that the phase 4 upgrades in today dollars, just over 100 million, and escalated to the midpoint of construction in 29 or 30, estimated at 113 million. So these estimates are at a concept level, and we have a contingency assigned that's commensurate with or proportionate to that level of accuracy that we're currently at. But in parallel with this site master plan work, Zoe's been working hard with our team at Carollo to develop a preliminary design, which is about a 30% level design, and that's nearing completion, and that will allow us to come back with a more accurate cost estimate for this next phase of work. And at the same time, we plan to bring forward some work with CBRD Finance to estimate the estimated cost per property within the service area to help kind of put these numbers in context. So as noted on the bottom, the current financial plan includes just under $50 million for this project. And so that will have to be updated. We also have a $7 million grant application underway for the Strategic Priorities Fund, which we hope will be successful and help to reduce the impact on the community. Oh, next slide. And just finally, next steps. So we have a review of the site master plan with the TAC pack on November 18th. So this is a key input to the LWMP stage 3. So they'll be reviewing it in that context. We will work with CBRD Finance to integrate the revised cost into the proposed financial plan, complete the 30% design, and undertake a value engineering process to try and identify any further impact, ways that we can build this cheaper, in a nutshell. And then looking a little bit farther out, we're still planning to have the stage 3 report drafted in spring and bring that through the TAC pack, the community, and the commission before submittal to the province in the summer. So that's it from us, but we're happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Chris and Zoe. I'll just let commission members know that if there's significant discussion on this, we will defer it to our next meeting, given that Water Committee is due to start in a few minutes. Director Kerr.
Thanks, Zoe and Chris. Just a quick question about phase 4. There's a lot of work in there. Wondering if was any thought of doing some of that in 2030, maybe some of it in 2035, and smoothing out the financial implications. Thanks.
Yeah, so that was a big focus on the planning work to date, was to try and push out as much as possible. So we feel the effort as we've done as much as we can to push as much out from the phase 4 scope. That being said, there is still some significant synergies in delivering scope together rather than spreading it out, by several years. So we've this kind of spacing of projects, roughly every 10 to 15 years through to the planning horizon, is kind of trying to strike that balance. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Any further questions or comments? Okay, a large report for receipt. We'll be hearing more about it in the future, but for now, I think we're good. Anyone opposed to, Director Cole Hamilton?
Sorry, not opposed. I just wanted to just make a note. I'd say I lack a little bit of confidence in the escalation, the sort of the assumed mid project price, like 2.5% a year, maybe what inflation is, but I don't, that's just not being what we've been experiencing, like regionally or nationally, in terms of major capital projects. So I'm not sure if perhaps a further review will go as to whether that's a reasonable kind of metric to be using in terms of future cost estimation.
Yep, certainly we can take a look at that before we bring the next estimate back. That is a long-term average.
Yeah,
certainly we've seen elevated.
I would love to have
inflation.
2.5% if
Yeah.
that were possible. Couldn't get it back, but
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking
Yeah.
the point.
We'll
Thank
definitely take a closer look at that before we come back.
Thanks for raising that, and thanks for the reports, Chris and Zoe. Anyone opposed to receipt? That is carried, and we'll take a motion for termination. Move Grant, second Nicole Hamilton, all in favor. It's carried. Thanks very much to staff and